the silence that started everything. It was a bright Los Angeles afternoon, and the red carpet outside the awards theater shimmered like fire under the sun. Fans screamed from behind the velvet ropes, waving handmade signs and snapping blurry pictures with shaking hands. The world was watching. Cameras clicked like a symphony. Reporters shoved microphones in every direction, and celebrities lined up one after another, dazzling in their designer suits and sparkling gowns. Keanu Reeves stepped out of the black SUV, quietly, wearing a simple black suit that barely caught the light. There was no glitter, no flashy jewelry, no entourage. Just him, calm, respectful, and completely unaware that today would become the most talked-about moment of the night. He smiled at a young girl in the front row who looked too shy to call his name. She clutched a small notebook in her hands. Keanu walked over without a word, knelt gently, and asked, "Is that for autographs?" She nodded quickly, eyes wide. He signed it, handed her back the pen, and said, "You're very brave to wait. Here." But while Keanu was making time for fans, something else was brewing further up the carpet. Inside the venue, cameras were being positioned for one of the show's big moments, a special charity award presentation. The producers had invited both Keanu Reeves and Will Smith to present the award together. Two Hollywood icons, two massive followings, two very different paths. Keanu, who had quietly donated millions to children's hospitals and never bragged once about it. And Will, who had been trying to rebuild his public image ever since that unforgettable incident a year earlier. Tonight was supposed to be a moment of unity, a moment of healing. The producers thought it was perfect. Two legends standing side by side, handing over a life-changing award to a teenage boy who had saved his community from a natural disaster. But what they didn't expect was what happened in the hallway backstage. Keanu walked calmly toward the green room. He was holding a folded paper, his speech written in pencil, not printed. As he approached the double doors, he spotted Will Smith standing just inside, surrounded by handlers and assistants, all of them giving him advice and quick rehearsals. Keanu didn't interrupt. He waited patiently for the right moment. When Will turned and saw him, there was a pause. Something stiff passed between them, an awkward history that only the media whispered about. A few years ago, Keanu had turned down a blockbuster film because he said the tone didn't feel kind. That film had later gone to Will Smith. It was a hit, but many insiders believed Keanu's rejection was a quiet criticism. Nobody ever spoke about it directly, but tonight, in front of the world, they were supposed to stand shoulder to shoulder. So Keanu stepped forward and extended his hand. What happened next stunned the room. Will looked at him, not with anger, not with warmth, but with something else. Uncertainty, maybe pride, maybe hurt. And then, he didn't take the hand. Instead, he turned slightly, adjusted his jacket, and continued rehearsing with his assistant as if nothing had happened. The room went silent. Even the assistants froze. Keanu didn't pull his hand back quickly. He left it there for a moment, as if giving Will a second chance. But Will didn't look back. After a few seconds, Keanu lowered his hand gently and nodded once to himself, like a man who had learned something but didn't need to explain it. He didn't walk away angry. He didn't show a single trace of embarrassment. He simply said to the nearest stagehand, "Is the boy already here? I'd like to meet him before we go up." The cameras never captured the moment directly, but whispers spread fast. A stage assistant posted a vague tweet. He reached out and got rejected, and still smiled like nothing happened. Class. Within minutes, fans started speculating. Who was she talking about? Who got rejected? And why was Keanu trending all of a sudden before even stepping on stage? But backstage, Keanu had already moved on. He found the teenage boy, a 16-year-old named Marcus, who had carried 2 kids out of a burning shelter during a flood in Mississippi. The boy's hands were still healing from the burns. Keanu sat beside him, pulled out a pair of gloves from his jacket pocket, and handed them to the boy. They were black motorcycle gloves, scuffed and worn. "I used these on John Wick 3, he said. "I think they're yours now." The boy stared, shocked. Keanu smiled softly. "Your hands saved lives. Mine just pretend to." Marcus was speechless. The moment was pure, unnoticed by most. No cameras, no journalists, just a quiet act of kindness in the middle of a storm. Later, as the presentation began on stage, the announcer called both Keanu Reeves and Will Smith to walk out together. Keanu entered with a calm presence. He waved gently, stood at the microphone, and introduced Marcus to the world with a voice filled with respect and admiration. When Will took his turn, his speech was professional but flat, his body language noticeably distant. But something changed, in the air. The crowd felt it. They had seen the handshake refusal in a viral GIF posted just seconds before the segment aired live. Twitter exploded with reactions. Side-by-side clips of the moment began circulating with captions like, "Keanu reaches out, gets nothing, and still uplifts a kid like a king." That was when hearts began to shift. Backstage after the show, a producer approached Keanu and said, "We didn't expect that to go the way it did, but the world needed to see it." Keanu just smiled. Sometimes the best scenes aren't written. Meanwhile, Will sat alone in his dressing room, staring at a tablet showing live reactions pouring in. The comments weren't angry, they weren't cruel, but they told the truth. People saw what happened, and people were watching what he did next, and that's where everything began to unravel or rebuild. Echoes louder than words. It had only been an hour since the award show ended, but the internet was already flooded. Social media timelines turned into battlefields of opinion, praise, and disbelief. The clip of Keanu extending his hand and Will, ignoring it, had gone viral across platforms. Some defended Will. Many didn't. But what no one could deny was the way Keanu handled it, with grace, patience, and unwavering dignity. A short fan video from behind the curtain showed just enough. No sound, just the quiet image of one man reaching out and the other stepping away. Within minutes, the hashtags began trending. Anak handshake heard round the world as Keanu kindness. Ilak's grace, under fire. Be better Will Keanu Reeves, as usual, didn't post anything. He never explained, never clapped back. He went straight home after the ceremony and did what he always did, fed his dog, made a simple dinner, and read a book under the warm light of his kitchen lamp. Meanwhile, in a luxury suite miles away, Will Smith sat on a designer couch, scrolling endlessly through comments. "You had a chance to heal, man. How could you disrespect him like that?" Keanu still made it about the kid. Class act. "Will, fix this before it's too late." His manager knocked softly on the door, holding a tablet. "There's more," she said. Keanu gave the boy his gloves, his John Wick gloves. Reporters are picking it up. It's everywhere now. Will looked up slowly. "Did the boy say anything?" She nodded. "Marcus just did a short interview. Said Keanu told him, 'Your hands saved lives. Mine just pretend to.'" "It's powerful." Will leaned back and sighed. He's always been that guy, ever since Speed. His manager paused, sensing something more beneath his voice. "You want to fix this?" she asked. Will didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed his eyes and whispered, "I don't even know why I did it. It wasn't hate. It was pride. Fear. I don't know." Back at his small home in the valley, Keanu wasn't watching the news. He was sitting in his garage, adjusting a bike engine that didn't really need fixing. Just something to keep his hands moving. His old friend Frank, a retired stuntman, pulled up and walked in. "You all right?" Frank asked, grabbing a wrench from the table. Keanu shrugged. "Yeah, nothing new. World's on fire because you were decent," Frank said. That handshake moment? You handled it better than I would have. Keanu looked up, finally smiling a little. Frank, when you've lost the people I've lost, you learn that pride is too heavy to carry, forgiveness is lighter. Frank nodded slowly. And what if he never apologizes? Keanu tightened a bolt. Then I keep walking. The next day, Marcus was invited onto a morning show. The young hero sat in a borrowed suit, his hands still bandaged under the sleeves, and told the world what the night meant to him. I didn't even notice the handshake thing, Marcus said shyly. All I saw was this man kneeling beside me telling me my scars made me strong. Nobody has ever said that to me before. The host smiled warmly. How did that make you feel? Like I matter, Marcus said. Not because of awards, not because of TV, just because someone looked at me and saw something good. Those words hit deeper than anyone expected. News outlets played that segment on repeat. Fans started reposting the clip with captions like, "This is what real influence looks like." Keanu, true to form, remained silent. By midweek, the Academy released an official behind-the-scenes gallery from the event. One photo, unintended but striking, showed the exact moment Will turned away from Keanu's hand. But what made the image unforgettable was Keanu's expression. Not anger, not humiliation, just peace. The image exploded. People began creating digital paintings, animations, and even murals. Artists across the world shared pieces titled "The Reach," "Unshaken," and "The Stillness." Keanu's quiet moment had become a symbol. Meanwhile, Will Smith's team was in panic mode. Publicists drafted statements, stylists planned humble appearances, and directors canceled 2 interviews. Sponsors were pulling back. Studios grew nervous. Even some fans, once fiercely loyal, said things like, "We don't want perfect, we want honest." And that's what broke him. Will finally called his mother. "Ma," he said quietly, "you always told me pride makes the wolf forget he was once a pup." She didn't reply for a moment. Then she said gently, "Baby, that man gave you an open hand, and you gave him your back. Now it's your turn to reach." Will took a long breath. "What if he doesn't want it? Then you still reach." The next day, Will showed up unannounced at the Children's Hospital in downtown LA. Not for cameras, not for press, just him, a few gifts, and a nervous heart. He asked if Keanu's foundation had any patients in that hospital. The nurse smiled. Almost all of them. He walked through the halls slowly, meeting kids, reading stories, even shedding a few tears with a single mother who was living in the waiting room. After a few hours, he asked quietly, "Can I leave something behind?" The nurse nodded. He took off his custom-made jacket and placed it in a donation box, but inside the pocket, he left a handwritten note. "I turned away from a man who offered peace, so now I offer kindness where I can. Will." By nightfall, Keanu Reeves finally saw one of the videos from Marcus's interview. His assistant had sent it with the subject line, "You need to hear this." Keanu watched as the boy repeated those words, "My scars make me strong." He paused the video, leaned back, closed his eyes, and in that quiet moment, he knew it wasn't about a handshake anymore. It was about what people do after the world sees their worst moment. He reached for his phone and typed a short message to a number that hadn't been used in years. "Will. It takes a bigger man to build the bridge. I'll walk halfway if you do." He hit send. Then he went back to fixing his motorcycle. What would Will do next? Would he walk the bridge, or let it crumble in silence? Walking halfway. The text sat on Will Smith's phone screen for a long time. Will. It takes a bigger man to build the bridge. I'll walk halfway if you do. He stared at it in silence. The room was dark except for the glow of the screen. His heart beat a little faster, not from fear but from something deeper, shame mixed with hope. He hadn't expected Keanu to reach out. Not after what happened. Not after the whole world took Keanu's side without even hearing his. His fingers hovered over the screen. He typed 3 replies, then deleted them. Everything sounded too formal, too cold, or too desperate. Finally, he wrote just one word. Deal. Across the city, Keanu put down his phone when the reply came in. He didn't smile or cheer. He just nodded. In his mind, it was never about pride or making Will pay. It was about letting go of the weight so both of them could stand taller, but he also knew the world wasn't ready to let it go. Forgiveness in private was one thing. Healing in public? That required something bold. The next morning, Marcus, the teen hero from the award show, got a call from an unknown number. Hello? He answered, cautious. Marcus, hey, it's Keanu Reeves. The boy almost dropped the phone. I want to ask you something, Keanu said, but only if you're comfortable. Okay, how would you feel about joining me and Will? For a sit-down conversation? No hosts, no reporters, just us. We want to listen to you, to each other, and maybe let the world listen in. Marcus hesitated. Me? Why me? Because, Keanu said gently, you're the only one who didn't see sides that night. You just saw people. 3 days later, the internet exploded again. A single tweet from Keanu Reeves's official account, which had been silent. For weeks read, a conversation worth having. No scripts, no filters. Just 3 people trying to understand. Attached was a quiet, unlisted YouTube link with the thumbnail. A small round table, 3 chairs, and no branding. The video title simply said, halfway. The video opened with soft lighting. Keanu sat on the left, wearing a plain gray hoodie. Will sat on the right, wearing a white shirt, no jewelry. And in the middle sat Marcus, nervous but brave. Keanu opened the conversation. There was a moment, he said slowly, when I offered a handshake and got none. I didn't feel anger, I felt sadness. Not for myself, but because something broke in that space. Will nodded, his eyes low. I've watched that clip 1,000 times. I know what people saw, but what they didn't see was what was going on in my head. I was scared. Scared of what? Marcus asked softly. Scared that if I took his hand, it would mean I forgave myself. And I wasn't ready to do that. Keanu turned gently. But it wasn't about you forgiving yourself. It was about letting someone else say, you're still welcome here. There was a pause. Marcus looked between them. I didn't even notice the handshake, he said. All I saw that night was kindness. You gave me your gloves. And you. He turned to Will. You gave me hope when you visited the hospital. Will's eyes shimmered. I didn't expect anyone to see that. They saw, Keanu said quietly. Just like they saw you walk away. And now they're seeing me walk back, Will added, his voice cracking slightly. The conversation lasted 27 minutes. There were no big speeches, no emotional music. Just 3 human beings talking honestly about pride, kindness, and the power of second chances. Keanu shared stories of grief, how losing his family had taught him to let go of bitterness before it could take root. Will opened up about years of pressure being the funny guy and how that smile sometimes hid too much pain. And Marcus, with surprising strength, spoke about being a burn victim, feeling invisible, and how one small gesture had changed everything for him. When someone strong tells you your pain matters, he said, it sticks. When the video ended, the world fell silent for a moment. Then the comments began. This is real. No media spin, no agenda, just men being honest. Keanu doesn't talk much, but when he does, you listen. Will, this is the man we hoped you still were. Marcus for president. The video shot to #1 in under 12 hours. Fans weren't just watching, they were reflecting, reposting with captions like, "I called my brother after this," "I forgave my dad," and "This made me rethink everything about grudges." One comment stood out, written by someone anonymous. "I was the one who posted the gif of the handshake moment. I thought it was funny. After watching this, I deleted it. Now, I just want to be better." The next time Keanu and Will saw each other in person, there were no cameras, no suits. They met at a park bench with 2 coffees. Keanu sat first. Will walked up, took a breath, and this time extended his hand. Keanu smiled and took it. No applause, no photos, just 2 men keeping a promise. That weekend, Marcus was invited back to the children's hospital, but this time, not as a patient. He walked in holding the hands of 2 people. One was Keanu Reeves, the other Will Smith, and the kids. They didn't care about past mistakes. They just knew 3 people came to read them stories and make them laugh. That was enough. But the story doesn't end here, because what happened next turned into something much bigger than a handshake. A surprise announcement was coming, one that would shake Hollywood, and maybe the world, in a whole new way. The project no one expected. The world had barely caught its breath from the powerful sit-down video when something unexpected happened. Keanu Reeves posted another message on his rarely used profile. Just one line. "We're building something." No explanation, no hashtags, no photo. Within an hour, Will Smith followed with a similar post. This time, it's not a movie. It's a movement. Speculation exploded. Fans thought maybe they were working on a documentary. Others guessed it was a non-profit or public healing campaign. Hollywood insiders whispered about a co-directed film, but no one knew for sure, until a quiet press conference was announced for Sunday morning. It wasn't held at a fancy hotel. It wasn't live-streamed through flashing ads. It was hosted outside a small youth center in south-central Los Angeles. No red carpet, no champagne, just a modest banner that read, "The Halfway House Initiative." The crowd was silent as Keanu stepped to the mic. He wore jeans and a plain black t-shirt. No makeup, no teleprompter. "This center," he said, slowly, "will be the first of many. It's not about rehab, not about fame. It's about forgiveness, real forgiveness, not the social media kind. The kind that changes lives." He looked over his shoulder. Will stood behind him, nodding. "We've both made mistakes," Keanu continued. "We've both been hurt, and we've both seen how hard it is for young people to find safe places to talk, especially boys, especially those taught to stay silent." Then Will stepped forward. "When I turned away from a handshake, it wasn't just about me," he said. "It was about every kid out there who's ever been taught to lead with pride instead of peace. We want to help rewrite that." Marcus appeared beside them, dressed in a volunteer shirt, smiling wide. "This," Will said, placing a hand on Marcus's shoulder, "is the kind of courage we want to build. This is the generation that'll take it farther than we ever could." The Halfway House Initiative was designed to build centers across America where young people, especially those recovering from violence, rejection, or emotional pain, could come and speak freely. No judgment, no labels, just ears that listened, hearts that cared, and mentors who showed up. Keanu pledged $5 million, Will matched it. But what mattered more than the money was the message. The internet had never seen anything like it. The launch video, filmed in one take, showed the 3 of them walking through the unfinished rooms of the first center. Paint buckets sat in corners, donated books piled on tables. A chalkboard had one phrase written on it: "What if they listened instead of laughed?" People everywhere shared the video with captions like, "This is how you make peace real. From handshake to healing." I needed this at 16. Even celebrities who usually stayed quiet started voicing support. A-list stars, athletes, even politicians offered funding or volunteer time. A popular rapper donated all profits from his latest album. A retired NFL player offered free coaching sessions for the center's sports program. An anonymous donor pledged to fund one center in every state. But not everyone was convinced. One headline read, "Publicity stunt or genuine change." A viral video from a skeptic influencer accused them of reputation repair through charity. He claimed the handshake moment was probably staged for attention. Will watched the video in silence. His face didn't flinch, but his heart dropped. "What if they're right?" he asked aloud in an empty kitchen. Keanu called him that. "Night. People will always question motive," he said. "Our job isn't to prove them wrong. It's to keep showing up." Will paused. "What if I mess up again?" Keanu smiled over the phone. "Then we keep walking. Halfway. Every time." Meanwhile, Marcus was becoming a voice for more than just burned hands and survival stories. Schools started inviting him to speak. Reporters called him the boy who changed two men, but he rejected that. "I didn't change them," he told a high school auditorium. "They changed themselves. I just reminded them it was possible." He told students to hug the friend they argued with, to call the parent they stopped speaking to say "I'm sorry" first, even if they weren't sure how it would be received. And slowly students began writing their own notes and pinning them on lockers. "You matter. I forgive you." "Thanks for listening," teachers cried. Janitors smiled. Entire school hallways turned into walls of hope. But not all walls fall easily. Will's oldest son, Trey, who had kept his distance during the controversy, called him late one night. "Dad," he said, voice guarded, "that handshake. It reminded me of when you walked out on my birthday dinner when I was 12. Will sat frozen. "I didn't know how to say it back then," Trey continued. "But it felt the same, like you chose something else over showing up for me." Will whispered, "I'm so sorry." "I know," Trey said. "I just needed you to say it." And just like that, a different kind of bridge was built. One not seen by the public, one made of words too soft for headlines, but strong enough to hold a father and son. By the end of the month, the first halfway house opened its doors. No ceremony. No fancy speeches. Just a simple sign on the front wall. "You don't have to be perfect to be welcome." The first person to walk through the doors wasn't a celebrity. It was a 14-year-old boy named Darius, whose father had been incarcerated. For most of his life, he walked in trembling. He left holding a notebook and a milkshake. In the notebook was a letter he had written during his visit. It was to his father. "I'm not ready to forgive, but I want to try." Keanu Reeves saw the note the next day when one of the volunteers showed it to him. He read it twice. Then he said softly, "That's the whole point." The volunteer asked, "What if Darius's father never replies?" Keanu looked out the window and answered, "Then Darius will know." He still showed up, halfway. But this was only the beginning. What happened next would test everything: kindness, humility, and even the fragile peace between two legends. Because someone from Will's past was about to surface, and he wasn't coming to forgive. The man who wouldn't forget. Just as the world began to embrace the message of the Halfway House Initiative, a shadow crept in from the past. His name was Larry Hamilton, a former producer, quiet, reserved, and once extremely close to Will Smith during his early rise in television. Back in the Fresh Prince days, Larry had helped Will navigate the chaos of sudden fame. He protected him, guided him, even fought studios on his behalf. But one day, it all fell apart. Nobody really knew what happened, only that Will stopped talking to Larry. And Larry never got a reason. Now, decades later, as the world praised Will's redemption arc, Larry showed up on a podcast, and the words he spoke sent shockwaves through the very foundation of the new movement. "I see Will out there now," Larry said slowly into the mic, talking about healing and handshakes and building bridges. "And I'm not trying to take anything away from that, but it's hard to watch when the man who talks about peace never once gave me a call. Not after he cut me off. Not after I lost everything." The host leaned in. "Do you think his change is real?" Larry didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Ask him why he never looked back when I got blacklisted." That clip was viewed over 4 million times in 24 hours. Will heard about it through his son, Jaden. He walked into the living room holding a phone. "Dad, have you seen this?" Will watched in silence. No blinking. No shifting. Just his jaw tightening with every sentence Larry spoke. "I thought you said you made peace with your past," Jaden said gently. "I did," Will replied. "Or, I thought I had." The world reacted instantly. Critics resurfaced the old rumors. Blogs asked tough questions. Was the new Will just another performance? Did the halfway house mean anything if he hadn't made peace with the people closest to him? The movement started losing momentum. Donors grew quiet. The media buzz faded. Even some volunteers at the center didn't show up that week. Marcus noticed it first. He found Keanu sitting quietly in the library room of the halfway house, staring at an old photo of a mountain trail. He could tell something was wrong. "You knew, didn't you?" Marcus asked. "About Larry." Keanu nodded. "I didn't know his name, but I knew Will still had someone he hadn't faced. What happens now?" Keanu looked up with tired but clear eyes. "We keep walking. Halfway." Meanwhile, Will did something nobody expected. He went to Larry's apartment. No cameras, no press, no handlers. Just a knock on a worn-out door. In a quiet building on the edge of the city. When Larry opened it, his face twisted with disbelief. "You actually came?" Will nodded. "I heard your interview," Larry scoffed. "Took you long enough." "I deserve that," Will said. "But I came to say something you've deserved to hear for a long time." Inside, they sat in silence for several minutes. Will finally broke it. "I left you behind because I was scared of being seen as weak. You knew too much about me. About my breakdowns. My insecurities. You held me together during my worst years, and I repaid you with silence." Larry didn't say a word. His eyes just locked on Will's. "I was wrong," Will said, voice trembling. "And I'm sorry, not just for cutting you off, but for letting you suffer alone while I smiled for cameras." Larry crossed his arms. "You think sorry makes up for 20 years? No," Will said. "I don't. But I hope it makes way. For the next 20. The conversation lasted 4 hours. By the end of it, Larry didn't forgive him, but he said something that mattered even more. "You didn't come here as a star. You came as a man. That's a start." Will stood to leave, before he reached the door. Larry said one final thing. "You still owe the world something better, so don't stop building it." A few days later, Will appeared back at the halfway house. Volunteers watched him walk through the front door with a different posture. Not proud, not confident, just human. Keanu met him in the hallway. "How'd it go?" he asked. Will exhaled. "Not clean, not pretty, but real." Keanu smiled gently. "Sometimes real is enough." The next morning, a video was posted on the Halfway House channel. Just Will, sitting in one of the library chairs. No script, no intro. He looked directly into the camera. "I let someone down, someone who gave everything to help me rise. And I turned my back on him when he needed me most. I've spent years telling people to be brave, but sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say, 'I was wrong.'" He paused, breathed deeply. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect applause. I just want to show my kids, and yours, what it looks like to keep walking, even when you fall." He reached forward, turned off the camera. The screen went black. Within hours, the video trended across every major platform, and this time, the comments weren't just full of praise, they were full of stories. "I called my brother for the first time in 8 years. I left a voicemail for my old friend. No reply yet, but I feel lighter. My dad saw this and cried. He said, 'I should have done this 20 years ago.' For the first time, The halfway house wasn't just a place. It was a symbol. Larry Hamilton watched the video from a small cafe. He didn't comment, didn't repost, but he smiled, and that was enough. But the story wasn't finished, because just as peace began to return, a letter arrived at the halfway house. No return address. No name, just 6 words written in shaky handwriting. I was the reason he died. Keanu Reeves opened it slowly. His hands went still. What did it mean? Who was it for, and whose life had been taken? Everything was about to change. The truth beneath the silence, the letter shook Keanu to his core. I was the reason he died. No signature. No explanation. Just those 6 words, written in a shaky, almost broken hand, on a torn piece of paper left in the mailbox at the halfway house. Keanu stared at it for a long time. Something about the handwriting felt off, like it had been written with pain, like the person's hand wasn't steady. He placed it on the table and turned off his phone. For the first time in days, he sat completely still. Will walked in A.E. Few minutes later, carrying 2 coffees. For you, he said casually. Extra cinnamon, because I know you. He stopped when he saw Keanu's face. Keanu handed him the note silently. We'll read it once, then again. His face went pale. Who's it about? Keanu shook his head. I don't know, but someone's carrying something they think we need to hear. The news of the letter spread quickly. Marcus found out from one of the volunteers. He walked into the library, where both men now sat in deep silence. Maybe it's someone who wants to confess something before they break, Marcus said. You always said this place is where people come when they don't know how to say it anywhere else. Keanu looked up. Maybe. What are you going to do? Keanu placed a hand over the note. We wait. If they wanted to stay silent, they wouldn't have written anything. 2 days later, another letter arrived. This time, it had a name. I was the reason he died. My name is Ronald Kemp. I worked on John Wick 2. The note included an address and nothing else. Keanu's hands trembled. He remembered the name. Ronald Kemp had been a stunt assistant. Quiet, always in the background. But what shook Keanu more was the timeline. John Wick 2 was filmed during the most emotionally draining season of his life. That was the year Joey died. Joey was a stunt double, fearless, full of energy, and beloved on set. He had taken a dangerous fall during filming and didn't survive. It had been labeled an accident, but now, Keanu and Will looked at each other. They knew what they had to do. They arrived at Ronald's house the next morning. A tiny, run-down home on the edge of Van Nuys. The grass was yellow. The blinds were closed. But the door opened as soon as they knocked. Ronald stood there, thinner than Keanu remembered. Gray stubble, sunken eyes, and hands that shook even when still. He didn't greet them, just stepped aside silently. Inside, the room smelled like dust and sorrow. Boxes of old set photos were scattered everywhere. Keanu spoke first. We got your letters. Ronald nodded, eyes down. You need to know. I've carried this too long. Will didn't speak. He simply sat beside the man and listened. Ronald finally spoke. The day Joey died, I was in charge of checking the rigging. We were short-staffed. The safety check was rushed. I told myself it was fine. Told myself it wasn't my fault when it happened. Tears welled in his eyes. But it was. The cable that failed, it had frayed edges. I saw them. I looked away. Keanu's heart ached. I was young, Ronald whispered. I thought saying nothing would make it go away. But I've died every day since then. Keanu stood, walked, over, placed a hand on the old man's shoulder. Joey loved what he did, Keanu said gently. He knew the risks. He never blamed anyone, not even life itself. Ronald broke down. And Will, sitting there in quiet understanding, said the one thing that changed everything. Then we don't let this pain end in silence. They didn't call the media, didn't post online. Instead, they brought Ronald to the halfway house the next day. He sat in a private room with a group of stunt coordinators, trainees, and young filmmakers. And for the first time, he told the full story. Not to be forgiven, but to be honest. He spoke about guilt, about how hiding a mistake becomes a prison, about how silence makes a scar grow deeper. By the end of the session, nobody judged him. They thanked him, and one of the young trainees, just 19, said softly, "You just saved future lives by telling us the truth." Ronald wept again. But this time it was the beginning of release. Keanu stood with him outside after. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Lighter," Ronald said. "Like I finally opened the door from the inside." Keanu nodded. That's what the halfway house is for. A week later, the center installed a new wall. Not a wall of shame, not a wall of pain, but a wall called the Unfinished Bridges. Anyone could come in and write a name, a story, a regret, or a confession, even anonymously. And beside every message was an empty space, a space where healing could one day begin. Marcus was the first to write something. His note read, "I still miss my dad, but I no longer hate him." Will's note simply said, "Larry, thank you for holding me up when I couldn't stand." And Keanu's? His note said, "Joey, your courage lives in every risk I now take with care." Weeks passed. Donations returned. Volunteers flooded back in. The movement grew stronger than ever, because it was no longer built on perfect people. It was built on broken ones willing to stand together. Netflix later offered to produce a series based on the halfway house, documenting stories of healing, forgiveness, and truth. But Keanu declined. "The real story," he said, "isn't meant to be scripted." Months later, Will and Keanu sat together on the same park bench. Where they first reconciled, no cameras, no lines, just two men, quiet. Will leaned back and whispered, "You know what I've learned through all this?" Keanu looked over. "What?" "It's never too late to walk halfway, unless you never start walking at all." Keanu smiled. Then they stood and walked forward, side by side.